Welcome to End of Life University on YouTube. Today I'm recording a quick tutorial to talk about 6 mistakes to avoid when doing your end of life planning. Now, we here in the end of life arena emphasize all the time how important it is for each one of us to think ahead in advance about our wishes at the end of life and to document them on paper in the form of an advance directive or a living will, some people call it. But there are mistakes you can make in the process of creating this documentation. And these are just a few quick things it's important for you to be aware of. So I'm going to go through those right now, and I have a couple of slides to show you to help us illustrate what I'm talking about here. So again, 6 mistakes to avoid when doing your end of life planning, and then I'll also share what to do instead. So mistake number 1 is putting your planning off for a later time. The Conversation Project says it's always too early until it's too late. And I hear people say this all the time, like, I don't need to think about that now. I'm not sick. I'm so healthy. I'm young. I have a long time to be here. I'll do it some other day. The problem is life is uncertain and variable, and emergencies can happen at any time. And if you haven't done the process of thinking through your wishes about the end of life and the type of healthcare you'd like to receive, you can end up in a situation where you are receiving the default level of healthcare, which here in the US is aggressive, all out life-saving care, which could mean you end up on a ventilator. And that may be something you would rather not have happen. The only way you can avoid that for sure is to make sure you've planned ahead and created the documentation you need to keep yourself out of that situation. So again, the first mistake is simply putting it off. And I'm hoping this little video will inspire you to sit down in the next few days and maybe think through what you might like to have and create the legal documentation you need to help your wishes become a reality when you reach the end of life, no matter when that is. Mistake number 2 is choosing the wrong healthcare proxy. I've seen this happen a number of times where a person, this is the first step in creating an advance directive, is naming someone who will speak for you if you can't speak for yourself. This person is crucial to carrying out your wishes at the end of life because they will need to advocate for you with the healthcare system. This person speaks up, goes to meetings or conference calls with doctors to have conversations about what you want for your end of life care and what you don't want. And the way you can avoid, again, receiving overly aggressive or invasive care is having the advance directive and make sure you have a healthcare proxy who can advocate strongly for your wishes. So many people simply choose their oldest child as their healthcare proxy. That seems logical to some people. I'll just name that person. Or sometimes they choose their spouse. But the problem is sometimes a person who is that close to you in your personal life has a difficult time making decisions and advocating for you at the end of life because they're in a very emotional situation themselves. Also, sometimes making these decisions can feel like a burden to someone who is in shock and also grieving over something sudden that has happened. And it can be helpful if you choose someone who's maybe one step removed from your most inner circle to be your proxy, someone who won't be as emotionally involved, who will be able to be a little bit more objective about the situation, who won't be hurting as much, and who won't feel the burden as much of being involved in the decision-making process. So it's important that you think through very carefully who's the right person to speak up for you. I have a previous tutorial on choosing a healthcare proxy that also includes a guideline for a healthcare proxy that tells the person you're choosing what they need to do, what their responsibilities are, what they need to learn from you, and how they might need to act on your behalf. The reason I created that guideline is so that you can show it to the person you've chosen to make sure they're willing to take on this responsibility, because that's the other part of it. This person has to agree that they will show up for you. They will go to the hospital. They will get on the phone with your doctors and talk to them. They will also listen to you and hear what your wishes are and be your representative and your advocate when you need it. So again, it's essential that you choose the right person. If you choose the wrong person for this job, you may end up with someone who isn't strong enough in the moment to tell the medical professionals what you want or to stand up to them. And medical professionals do sometimes go against your written documentation. Sometimes it requires a proxy to get in the middle of things and argue with them and disagree and advocate for you. So again, mistake number 2, choosing the wrong person. Just make sure you've thought that through carefully. Go ahead and listen to the other tutorial I made to guide you in a step-by-step process of making that decision so that you have the best advocate you can possibly have. Mistake number 3 that I've seen people make is getting lost in the details. And what I mean here is that sometimes, depending on the type of form you're filling out, sometimes people try to imagine every possible scenario that could occur at the end of life. They try to think through, what would I want if I had to be on dialysis because my kidneys are failing? Would I want that or not? Would I want to be tube fed? Would I want antibiotics? Would I want major surgery to try to save my life at the end of life? Sometimes people try to think through every possibility, and actually, you can't possibly do that. There are too many nuances here and too many possible things that can happen. And you can end up being paralyzed and unable to actually make decisions and complete these forms if you're thinking too much about the scenarios that happen. So it's helpful if you can do some bigger picture thinking and actually pull back a little bit and think about, what do I want it to be like when I die? This actually happened with my own mother when she was filling out 5 wishes, and I was on the phone with her. She was asking me all kinds of questions like, what would it be like? What would it be like if I hit my head and I had a blood clot in my head? What would they do? And what should I want to have happen then? And it got to be so convoluted and so obscure in some ways, the things we were talking about, that it was impossible for her to make a coherent decision about what she wanted. And I finally just stopped and I said to her, what do you want it to be like, Mom, when you die? When you are breathing your last breaths, where do you want to be cared for? And who do you want to be with you? So looking at it from that simple perspective made it so much easier for Mom. She said, I want to be in my own home, in my own bed, and I want you to be taking care of me, to me. And so that made it very clear. This is the big picture of how she would like things to work out. Every other decision about the care she received could be guided by this knowledge. She wants to be able to go home and she wants me to be able to care for her at home. And in fact, it did guide our decision making when Mom ended up in a hospital a month or so before she died. And there was a possibility of doing surgery, which she really didn't want. And as we sat down to make the decision, should she have the surgery or not, it became clear that the surgery itself was so risky for her at her age and in her frail health that had she gone through the surgery, there was a very big chance that she would not be able to go home and die in her own home. There was a big chance that she would either die on the operating table or experience complications afterwards that would require her to stay in the hospital. So we were able to say no to the surgery because we knew she wants to go home. That's her number one priority. So, looking at it from this big picture can be really helpful in terms of making all the moment to moment decisions that have to be made in the midst of a healthcare crisis. And if there's anything for you to communicate to your healthcare proxy when you've chosen the right person to play that role for you, is are these two questions: where do I want to be cared for, and who do I want to be with me? When they know that, that can help inform every other decision that they're asked to make on your behalf. So, again, don't get lost in the details, focus on the bigger picture. Mistake number 4 is not discussing your plans with your doctor. And I've heard over and over stories of people who went to all the trouble of filling out an advance directive, of having it witnessed and notarized, making all these careful plans, and then tucking it away in a file cabinet, never telling their doctor what their wishes were, and not even consulting with the doctor about whether or not their wishes were realistic. So, to begin with, it's important that you talk to your doctor about your healthcare situation, particularly if you're dealing with a chronic illness or a life limiting illness right now. Speak to your doctor about some of these issues and have your doctor help you walk through certain scenarios and help you make the best choices for yourself. Your own doctor is the best place to get information as you're trying to make these decisions. Also, your doctor needs to have a copy of your advance directive in order to serve as well as a medical advocate for you. And it should be part of your medical record so that if you do enter into a hospital and your doctor is involved in your care, that person has access to your advance directive and can help guide decisions as well for you along with your healthcare proxy. So do not put your forms in a file drawer somewhere or a safe deposit box. I've heard of that as well. You need to make sure you've talked to your doctor, make sure your forms are accessible. So, mistake number 5, not talking to your loved ones about your wishes. First of all, you need to talk to your healthcare proxy. That's the number one step for them to become your proxy, is to have a conversation with you about what you want and what your wishes are. But you should also talk to all of your loved ones, because you're choosing one person to act as your proxy. But it's important that the rest of your loved ones have some sort of buy-in here to what your wishes are, that they know and understand what you want and what you are hoping for yourself. You can help avoid a lot of conflicts amongst family members if you've talked to everyone, and it's especially advised to talk to everyone at once if you can, at the same time, so that they've all heard the same conversation. They all hear you say the same words. I've been in many situations where one family member said, "Mom told me this is what she wanted." And another family said, "No, she told me the opposite thing." And those two family members then go at each other in a terrible conflict, each believing that they have the correct information. And part of that problem is having multiple conversations at different times with different people. So, if you can arrange that you could talk to as many of your loved ones as possible at the same time about your wishes, you will help avoid some of those conflicts, because they can remind each other, "Remember, we were there with mom and she said this, and it was written down in her advance directive that this is what she wanted." So, a big mistake can be, again, not talking to your loved ones about your wishes. They need to know. And in that way, not only do you have a legal healthcare proxy who stands up for you, but other family members will stand up for you as well. And they're more likely to be unified and to stand together and all work on your behalf toward the kinds of wishes that you are hoping for. And then mistake number 6 is not updating your end of life preferences over time. So, because I'm advocating that you create these forms now, Instead of waiting for a time in later life or a time when you have a life-limiting illness, you may have a lot of years of life ahead of you, and things change over time. Your opinions might change, your preferences might change as you go through life, and your situation might change. The person you chose as your healthcare proxy might move away or might develop some sort of health condition themselves and no longer be able to advocate for you. You may live in a new place, you may have new people in your life, you may have entirely new situations that you're facing, including health situations, and all of your preferences could possibly change. Whatever you put in writing now can be changed at any time. The most important thing is if you create a new directive, destroy the old one. And if your doctor has a copy, make sure your doctor gets the updated version. Make sure your family knows of your updated plans as well. It's recommended that you revisit your plans every 5 years or anytime you have a change in status, particularly a change in healthcare status, but again, a change in your family, a change in your living situation, a change that might affect how your wishes get carried out. So again, number 6, make sure you have a plan for updating your documents in the future so that you can stay current with any changes that are happening for you in your life in general, but also changes in your attitudes and your wishes for yourself. So, what to do instead of these mistakes? Number 1, start your end of life planning now. It's never too early. And there's no reason to not get something in writing now, have a healthcare proxy for now. Anyone age 18 and over should have a healthcare proxy. And again, you can change it at any time in the future. You can change it as many times as you want as you go through life, but don't put it off. Get going, get your documents, and start doing this planning now. And number 2, choose the best possible person for your healthcare proxy. And as I said before, you can watch the tutorial for a little more advice on that and to download the handout on guidelines for a healthcare proxy so that you can show your proxy what they need to be prepared for in the future when they advocate for you. And then again, focus on the big picture first instead of small details. Spend some time imagining if this were your last day of life, if you were receiving healthcare because you had a serious life-limiting illness, would you want to be in a hospital or in a hospice setting, or would you like to be home with a home hospice and family members if that's possible? Again, no one knows for sure what the circumstances might be at the end of life, but focusing on how you would like things to be gives everyone a general direction and a general sense of how to make sure you experience what you're hoping for, the best of your wishes to as great a degree as possible at the end of life. So again, look at the big picture first and don't get lost in those small details. And then, of course, discuss your plans with your doctor. Fill out your advance directive, take it in the office with you, ask questions. And depending on the state you live, each state has a different advance directive form, but you might choose a form that's legal across many states, like 5 wishes. Whatever it is that you choose to complete, take it with you. Have a visit with your doctor. Your doctor can bill for this kind of planning, so don't feel bad. They can get paid for doing this with you, and you have a right to sit down and ask questions about what you might expect when you do reach the end of life, no matter how far off it could be. And then again, leave a copy of your signed and notarized document with your doctor to be part of your medical record. And number 5, talk to your loved ones. Make sure your documents are easily accessible. It can be helpful to just give each one of them a copy of your advance directive so they can read it with their own eyes and have it in their possession. But of course, your healthcare proxy has to have a copy available to them. If you have, at the present time, a life-limiting illness that you are dealing with, there are forms, POLST forms, POLST, POLST post most forms, different states, they have different names. But these are physician's orders, legal forms that you can have with you in case an emergency medical team comes to your residence and needs to offer you emergency care. These documents give them guidance and protection because they're legal doctor's orders for just how invasive to be in the care that they offer you, how aggressive to be. So this is an additional form you may want to have, but it has to be easily and readily accessible to an emergency response team, which means you may need to keep it on your refrigerator attached with a magnet where it's visible and anyone can find it in the midst of an emergency. So we're talking about here, EMTs get called in an emergent and urgent situation. Decisions have to be made in the moment. There's not time to go looking through your file cabinet or searching through a pile of papers. It has to be in a place where it can be easily seen in order to be useful and in order to be carried out appropriately. And then number 6, revisit your plans every 5 years or whenever there's a change in your health or the situation you find yourself in. Pretty simple. If you just think ahead, like these are some things for you to focus on to make sure you don't get tripped up in your end of life planning, to make sure you can make the best possible plans for yourself that have the greatest chance of actually being carried out at the end of life. And I think sometimes one of the tragedies I've seen is when people had an advance directive, they went to the trouble of thinking through and filling out these forms, but the forms weren't available or accessible. No one knew what this person's wishes were. And so they don't get carried out. They don't happen. The person ends up getting care that they really didn't want. That's far more aggressive than they would have wanted. So let's do this for ourselves. It's a gift we give ourselves and a gift of love that we give to our family members as well when we do this kind of planning in advance and we go to the trouble of putting it in writing and taking a few extra steps to make sure people know about it and that we have the right people in our lives available to advocate for us. So I hope you find this helpful. There is a handout based on this discussion that you can download. And when you look down in the description for this video, you'll find a link where you can download that handout. Also, a link back to the tutorial I mentioned before on choosing a healthcare proxy. So thanks for joining me here again on End of Life University on YouTube.